The dinner was cold before it began. Not the food. Mrs. Beale had seen to the food as she saw to everything in the Hartwell household, with the specific competence of a woman who had been managing a family's practical dignity for 20 years, and understood that dignity in this family was now the advance of practical management rather than financial ease. The soup was warm. The candles were lit. The table was set with the good china that had survived the scandal of 1812, as the good china always survived, outlasting the silver, which had been sold in 1815, and the portraits in the East Wing, which had gone in 1817, and the country house in Wiltshire, which had gone in 1818, when the mortgage had become the impossible thing it had been threatening to become for a decade. The cold was the quality of the air between the four people seated at the table. Lord Hartwell at the head, with the expression of a man who has made a decision and is preparing to present it as having been made for the benefit of others. His second daughter, Clara, 18 and pretty, and wholly absorbed in the condition of the world as it related to her directly. His youngest, Sophie, 16, and watching everyone with the bright recording attention of a girl who had grown up in a household where the adults communicated most meaningfully through what they did not say, and at Lord Hartwell's right hand, as she had been at the right hand of every household occasion for the past 8 years, Lady Amelia Hartwell, who was 26 and had hazel eyes and the composed expression of a woman who had learned, over 8 years of being useful, that the composed expression was the most efficient instrument available. She had known something was coming since the morning, when her father had asked her twice whether she intended to attend dinner, which was the kind of question that answered itself. She had known it more specifically since the afternoon, when she had found him in the study, not reading the letter on his desk, but holding it in the manner of a man who has read a thing many times and is performing the reading rather than doing it. She had spent the afternoon in her room completing an essay. The essay was the 14th she had written under the name of Mr. A. Hartley, whose pieces on parliamentary reform and the condition of the working poor had been appearing in the Westminster Chronicle since 1817, and who had acquired in 3 years the specific reputation of a commentator whose analysis was precise and whose prose was uncommonly clean. The editor, Mr. Gibbons, communicated with Mr. Hartley through a postal address in Bloomsbury and had never inquired too closely into the postal address. As editors of reform publications in 1820, had learned the wisdom of not inquiring too closely into things that produced good copy. Amelia had sealed the essay and given it to Mrs. Beale's nephew to post, and then she had come to dinner and looked at her father's expression and understood that the evening would require her full attention. Her father told them after the soup. He told them with the practiced language of a man who had been finding the form for a difficult communication, and had arrived at the version that was most favorable to his own position in the presentation. He told them that arrangements had been made for Amelia's betrothal to Viscount Blackwood of Seabrook Manor in Dorset, which would secure the family's financial situation and provide for Clara and Sophie's seasons and their prospect accordingly. He told them the Viscount was a man of significant standing and unimpeachable character, and that the arrangement was to the advantage of all parties. He told them the announcement would be made at the Aldermere reception on Thursday. Clara began speaking immediately, with the specific fluency of a girl who processed things through sound. Sophie said nothing, which was more eloquent than anything Clara said, and she looked at Amelia with the expression of a girl who understood that something significant was being done to her sister, and who did not have the authority to prevent it. Amelia set down her soup spoon. She asked her father the Viscount's Christian name. Her father told her, Theodore. Theodore Blackwood. The dining room was very quiet. Amelia looked at the soup bowl. She looked at the candles. She looked at the good china that had survived the scandal of 1812. She received the name with the full, specific attention of a woman who has been given information that has rearranged the entire floor plan of everything she thought she understood, and who is managing the rearrangement with the composed expression, because the composed expression is the most efficient instrument available. Theodore Blackwood. She had last seen Theodore Blackwood in the spring of 1812 at the Forsyth Ball, which was the last significant occasion before the season's end, and which she had attended with the specific, carefully managed hope of a girl of 18 who had spent the preceding 3 months being courted, quietly, correctly, in the form of meaningful conversation and twice dance sets, and the small, Deliberate attentions that communicated intention without announcement. By a young man of 26, whose company she had found the best company available. He had not come to her at the Forsyth ball. He had looked at her once, from across the room, with an expression she had not been able to read and had spent 8 years attempting to, and he had left early, and the season had ended, and the courtship had ended with it. And then the autumn had brought the scandal, and the years had brought the management of the scandal, and the Theodore Blackwood of the spring of 1812 had become the specific, private grief of a woman who had other things to attend to. She picked up her soup spoon. She told her father she understood. She told him she would be ready for Thursday. She returned to the soup. If you are new to Moonlight at Mayfair, this is the story of a woman who spent 8 years being useful, and who is about to discover that the life she arranged herself to survive has brought her, by a road she did not choose, back to the beginning of the thing she wanted. Subscribe before we go further, and if you have been here before, you already know. The man across the room in 1812 is the man at the end of the arrangement in 1820, and neither of them has forgotten what was between them. Stay. This one earns its ending. He came to the Hartwell house on Wednesday, not the reception. The reception was Thursday, the public occasion, the announcement with its correct form and its witnesses. Wednesday was the private meeting that propriety required before the public one, the meeting in which the two parties were permitted to establish that the arrangement was not entirely objectionable to both, which was the minimum that civility demanded and the maximum that most such arrangements produced. Amelia received him in the drawing-room. He was taller than she remembered, 8 years and a different quality of life, the life of a man who had been managing a large and complicated estate and a fractious family and a parliamentary seat for 8 years, had changed him in the way that years of real work changed people. Not harder, precisely, but more settled into his own dimensions, the way stone settled into the landscape it had been placed in. He had the same sharp features and the grey eyes she had memorized, without meaning to, at the Forsyth ball, and he had the same quality of entering a room as though he had decided to enter it, rather than been brought into it. He looked at her. She looked at him. The drawing-room was warm and the April light was good, and between them was the specific, fully loaded silence of two people who recognize each other and are deciding, simultaneously, what to do with the recognition. He told her it was good to see her again. He told her he hoped she was well. She told him she was well, and that she hoped he was also well, and she offered him tea, which he accepted, and she poured it with the steady hands of a woman who had been managing difficult situations for 8 years and whose hands had learned from the managing. He sat across from her. She asked him about Seabrook Manor. She had looked it up, the county description, the estate records that were public, the specifics of a property in Dorset that she was apparently going to inhabit, and she had arrived at a set of questions that were practical and, therefore, useful as the first territory of a conversation that had considerable weight behind it. He answered her questions. He answered them with the specific quality of a man who had expected a more managed version of this meeting and was finding, in the practical questions about the Manor's library and the proximity to the sea and the condition of the East Wing, a conversation that was more itself than the form usually produced. She asked about the library because she needed to know whether the library was adequate for work. He asked her what work she was referring to, and she told him she read extensively and wrote occasionally and required a room that was properly lit and not too cold in the winter months. He told her the library was the best room in the house. He told her the east windows caught the morning light from February through October. He told her the collection was in reasonable order, which was the honest description of a library that had been assembled over 3 generations without a consistent organizing principle. She told him she could provide the organizing principle. He looked at her. She looked back with the clear, direct attention she gave to everything that required it. Something moved across his face, too brief and too complex to name from across the tea table, but present. It was the specific, private quality of a man encountering something he had not expected and finding the encounter, despite the weight of everything else in the room, interesting. He told her he had no doubt of that. She told him there was a matter she wished to address before Thursday. He told her to go ahead. She told him she was aware of the financial circumstances that had produced the arrangement. She told him she was not going to pretend those circumstances were not relevant, because pretending things were not relevant when they were was a form of dishonesty she found unproductive. She told him she was entering the arrangement with the intention of conducting it honestly and without performance, which was the only kind of arrangement she was capable of conducting. She told him she wanted to know whether he was entering it with a similar intention, or whether the arrangement was to be one of those situations in which both parties managed their positions rather than occupying them. He was quiet for a moment. He told her, similar intention. He told her he had not entered an arrangement he intended to manage from behind a performance, and he was not starting now. She told him. Good. He asked her, and the quality of the asking was the asking she had remembered from 1812. The direct, genuine interest of a man who actually wanted to know the answer, what she wished for from the marriage beyond the practical arrangement. She looked at the April light on the drawing room window. She told him she wished to be allowed to be herself, not the useful daughter, not the managed wife, not the version of herself that had been arranged for the benefit of the family's situation for the past 8 years. The whole person, with all the inconvenient dimensions. He told her he required the same. She told him, then we begin from an honest position. He told her, yes, and he asked, with the small private precision that she had almost forgotten and was now remembering in full, whether the inconvenient dimensions included a view on the parliamentary reform debates, because he had read an essay in the Westminster Chronicle under the name of A. Hartley that had taken a position on the condition of the working poor that he found both persuasive and considerably more rigorous than the position he himself had been defending in committee. Amelia looked at him. The drawing room was very still. She told him Mr. Hartley was a person of her acquaintance, he told her. Mr. Hartley's acquaintances appeared to be well chosen. She looked at the tea things. She told him, if we are to begin from an honest position, Mr. Hartley is a postal address in Bloomsbury. He received this the way she had hoped he would receive it, which was, as the significant fact it was, held with the full weight appropriate to it, without the management that would have diminished it. He told her, your analysis of the enclosure provisions was correct, and the committee's position needs revision. He told her, I would like to discuss it at Seabrook. She told him, Wednesday evenings. She told him she had developed a preference for Wednesday evenings as the hour for important discussions. He told her Wednesday evenings were available. She poured the second cup of tea. Seabrook Manor arrived in June like a gift she had not expected to receive. The Dorset coast had a quality she had not encountered before, not the polished beauty of the Surrey estates or the cultivated grandeur of the Yorkshire houses she had visited as a girl, but something rawer and more honest. The cliffs above the sea had the specific, indifferent beauty of things that had been themselves for a very long time, without requiring anyone's opinion about it. The wind had opinions of its own. The light on the water in the early morning was the light of a world that had been awake before she was and would continue after. She stood at the east window of the library on the first morning and looked at it, and understood why he had said the east windows caught the morning light. The household was the household of a man who managed things with the precision of someone who had understood, early, that precision was the form that care took when care could not be performed openly. The staff were well treated in the specific way that showed in the quality of their work. The floors were clean, not because someone feared consequences, but because the floors were cared for. The kitchen garden was in good order. The horses were in good condition. Theodore's aunt, Lady Cecil Blackwood, was installed in the East Wing with the permanent quality of a woman who had been managing the domestic situation at Seabrook for 12 years and regarded Amelia's arrival with the combined warmth of genuine welcome and the slight proprietary concern of someone who has been running an important institution and is now receiving a new administrator. She was warm. She was also very thorough in her warmth, which meant she was in the library at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at the breakfast table before anyone else, and at the pre-dinner gathering in the drawing room with the expression of a woman extracting the maximum information from the available social occasion. Amelia liked her immediately. Theodore's younger brother James was at Seabrook for the summer, with the slightly provisional quality of a young man of 22 who was present, at his brother's invitation but not entirely settled in the reason for his presence. He had the Blackwood features and the grey eyes, but where Theodore wore his with the settled confidence of a man who had been living inside his own character long enough to be comfortable there, James wore his with the energy and occasional recklessness of someone who had not yet determined what kind of person he was going to be. He was kind to Amelia's sisters. This she noted. He was also, she noticed in the second week, occasionally absent from meals in a way that produced in Theodore the specific, controlled quality of a man managing concern he did not intend to display. The mornings were the time they found each other, apparently without arrangement. She came to the cliff path early because the light was best before 8, and because the walk gave her the particular quality of thought that physical motion always gave her. The body engaged so the mind could work freely. He came to the cliff path because, she understood from the third morning, he had been coming to the cliff path before breakfast for years and was not going to stop because someone had arrived in his house. They walked. The walking was not the walking of two people performing ease. It was the walking of two people who had discovered, in the drawing room in April and in the library in the first week of June, that the company of the other was the kind of company that required nothing to be performed in order to be sustained. He showed her the sea, not the view. She could see the view without instruction. He showed her the sea the way a man showed a thing he had been living alongside for years, and had accumulated real knowledge of, the specific color of the water that predicted the afternoon's weather, the particular birds that appeared at different seasons, and what they indicated about the conditions further offshore, the way the cliff face changed below the path, and what it told a knowledgeable eye about the geological history of the coast. She found this more interesting than she had expected. She found, specifically, the quality of his attention when he was describing something he knew. The careful precision of a man for whom knowledge was not performance, but use. More interesting than most things she had encountered in a drawing room. She gave him the reform debates. Not all at once. She was not a woman who opened her full position in a single conversation, having learned that positions stated whole were positions that could be dismissed whole. She gave them incrementally, over the morning walks and the evening library sessions that had become the particular territory of their acquaintance. The enclosure provisions first, because that was where they had begun in April, and because the ground was already established. Then the question of the working poor, which she argued from the practical evidence of what she had been reading for 3 years in the research for Mr. Hartley's essays. Then the constitutional question, which was where they disagreed most substantively. They disagreed well. This was the discovery of June. That they disagreed in the specific, productive way of two people who had reached different conclusions from genuine analysis and who were interested in the gap between the conclusions rather than in the vindication of their own positions. He revised his position on the enclosure provisions in the third week of June. He told her so directly, without the performance that revision sometimes required from men in his position. He told her her analysis of the labor cost data had exposed an error in the committee's modeling that he found he could not account for any other way. She told him the error had been in the modeling since 1817 and had been producing incorrect projections for 3 years, and that the 3 years of incorrect projections were having real effects on real people, and that she was glad he had found it because she had been unable to get it into the Chronicle without Mr. Hartley's piece being dismissed as the work of a partisan rather than an analyst. He told her, after the wedding Mr. Hartley's name would no longer be necessary. She looked at him on the cliff path with the morning sea behind him. She told him, "I am not certain I want Mr. Hartley to disappear entirely. He has been useful," he told her. "I am not suggesting disappearance. I am suggesting attribution," he told her. "There is a difference between a pseudonym as protection and a pseudonym as concealment, and after October the protection is available without the concealment." She looked at the sea. She asked him, "Are you comfortable with a wife whose essays appear in the Westminster Chronicle?" He told her, "I am considerably more comfortable with a wife whose essays are correct than with one whose essays are wrong." She told him, "That is the most practical endorsement of intellectual partnership I have encountered." He told her, "I am a practical man." She told him, I had noticed. The specific, contained quality of his smile, the one she had been cataloguing since April and which appeared rarely enough to be worth noting every time it appeared, was present on his face for a moment before the sea wind took it. She found the documents on a Tuesday in the second week of July. She had been in the estate office because the estate office contained the archive that Theodore's agent, Mr. Forsyth, had mentioned contained historical documents about the Hartwell connection to the Blackwood estate, and she was a woman who read archives as a matter of professional habit and had asked permission and received it. The documents were in a box that had been filed under the Hartwell estate correspondence of 1811 and 1812, the years before the scandal, and they were, when she read them with the full, specific, unmanaged attention she gave to everything that required it, a complete account of a fabrication. Her uncle Gerald Hartwell had written to 3 separate recipients in the spring of 1812, in 3 separate letters whose copies were here in the archive, each one telling a version of a story that had not happened. The story involved Amelia and a man named Pemberton, who had courted her briefly and without success in the earlier part of the season, and the story, as Gerald had constructed it for 3 audiences, was the story of a young woman who had encouraged Pemberton while accepting Blackwood's attentions. A story of duplicity and bad character that was, in the specific social economy of 1812, the kind of story that required a man of honor to withdraw. She sat in the estate office with the documents on the desk, and she thought about the Forsyth Ball. She thought about the expression she had not been able to read. She thought about 8 years. She was a woman who had been trained, by 8 years of managing difficult situations, to receive difficult information with composure. She received this with composure. She sat with the composure for a considerable time. Then she put the documents back in the box, and she took the box to the library, and she sat in the east window chair, and she began copying the relevant letters in her own hand, because the originals needed to stay in the archive, and she needed a version she could carry. She was still copying when Theodore came to the library. He looked at the archive box. He looked at the copying. He looked at her face with the full, specific attention of a man who had been paying that kind of attention for 2 months, and who understood from what he was seeing that something significant had happened. She showed him the letters. She showed them to him without introduction and without the managed softening that would have been the kind thing. He was not a man who needed the kind version. He needed the true one. He read them. The library was very quiet. He read them twice. His face, which was a face she had been learning to read since June, passed through a sequence she could not name individually but could recognize in its whole as the passage of a man who has received information that has rearranged 8 years of understanding and is conducting the rearrangement with the discipline of someone for whom discipline was the instrument of survival. When he finished the second reading, he set the pages down. He told her, "This is your uncle's hand," she told him. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Then he told her he owed her an apology. He told her it was the most insufficient apology in the history of insufficient apologies, and that he knew it was insufficient and was making it anyway, because it was what was owed, and he did not avoid what was owed. She told him she had spent 8 years believing she had done something wrong. She told him she did not know what she had done, had spent 8 years reviewing the season of 1812 for the thing she must have done, and had not been able to find it. He told her, "You did nothing." He told her the error was his, that he had accepted the account of a man with an interest in its acceptance without demanding the full evidence, and that he had been too proud to seek the explanation that she, in her silence, had apparently been unable to give him because she had not known there was anything to explain. She told him, "You were 26 and the account came from a member of my family and it was presented as established fact." She told him she did not find fault with his response. She found fault with the person who produced the account. He asked her, "What do you intend to do about your uncle?" She had been thinking about this since she found the documents, and she had arrived at a position she was now going to give him in full. She told him about Gerald Hartwell's position in the family, the specific, structural position of a man who had been angling for 12 years to become guardian to her sisters and controller of the family assets in the event of Lord Hartwell's death or incapacity. She told him about the letters she had found from Gerald to her father's solicitor, which she had found the previous week in a different part of the archive while looking for something else, and had not yet understood in full until now. She told him that Gerald's interest in preventing the marriage was not simply the interest of a man who resented his niece's good fortune, was the interest of a man who had identified a threat to a long-term strategy. She also told him about James. She told him gently, because it was a thing about his brother, and it required care. She told him that she had seen James twice, returning to the manor from the direction of the village in the early morning, and she had seen James speaking to a man she had subsequently identified, through the local knowledge of Mrs. Beale's counterpart at Seabrook, as a person in the employ of Gerald Hartwell. He received this with the stillness of a man who had suspected something and was now receiving its shape. She told him she did not believe James was doing it willingly. She told him she believed James was doing it under the specific pressure of a young man who has a debt he cannot address through legitimate means and who has been approached by someone who offered to address it in exchange for information. She told him, "Your brother is not your enemy. He is your uncle's instrument. The distinction matters." He looked at her. He told her, "How do you want to proceed?" She had a plan. She had been building it since she found the first set of documents, in the way she built everything, from the available elements, sequenced correctly, with each step providing the necessary condition for the next. She laid it out for him on the library table in the same clear, specific way she laid out arguments for the Chronicle. The pre-wedding ball. Gerald would be in attendance, because the social occasion required it, and because Gerald would not absent himself from an occasion at which he intended to observe and possibly act. James could be managed separately before the ball if Theodore spoke to him directly. The documents needed to reach the appropriate legal authority before the ball. She had identified the relevant solicitor and the relevant channel, and the reaching needed to be accomplished in a way that produced a response by the evening of the ball. She had a further element that she had not yet decided whether to include. He asked her, "Tell me the further element." She told him about the essay she had been writing for the past 2 weeks, which was not a reform essay and was not an analytical piece, but was something she had not written before as Mr. Hartley, which was a personal defense. A defense of the Blackwood family's honor, written in response to a series of whispered narratives that had been circulating in the season. The whispers that Gerald had been managing, she now understood as the next stage of the strategy. The essay was addressed to those narratives directly, by name, with the specific, documented refutation of each, and it would, if published and read publicly, be more effective than any legal instrument in the short term, because public narratives were the currency of the social world, and public refutation was the only instrument that operated in the same currency. She told him, "If I read it publicly at the ball under my own name rather than Mr. Hartley's, it achieves 2 things. It resolves the social narrative and it removes the pseudonym permanently." She told him, "It also risks my own reputation, because a woman who reads political essays publicly at pre-wedding balls is not a conventional figure, and the unconventionality will be noted." She told him, "I wanted to tell you before I decided, because it affects your name as well as mine." He looked at her across the library table with the full, attending quality she had come to trust entirely over the course of 2 months. He told her, "Read it." He told her, "Your name on your own work is the correction that should have been made 8 years ago." He told her, "Read it." July became August, and August became September, and the summer accumulated in the specific way of a summer that is doing something real. The Rose Garden storm happened on an evening in August when the weather came in from the sea with the specific, sudden quality of weather that had not announced its intentions and which arrived as they were walking in the garden after dinner. The lightning, first distant and then close, and then the rain which was not gentle. She had not been wearing her pelisse. He had not brought his coat. They ran for the pergola at the garden's edge, which had a roof that was mostly adequate, and they arrived at the mostly adequate roof in the state of 2 people who have been rained on, and who find themselves in the close warmth of a structure that was not designed for 2 people standing quite this close together, required to manage the proximity. She was managing it. She was managing it with the composed expression and the efficient instrument. And then he pushed the wet hair from her face, a gesture so direct and so without ceremony that the composed expression was simply insufficient for it, and he told her quietly that he had been wanting to do that since the first morning on the cliff path, when the wind had done the same thing, and he had not had the standing to act on the wanting. She told him he had the standing now. He told her he wanted to be certain, before he acted on it, that she understood the distinction between him acting on the wanting, because the arrangement permitted it, and him acting on it because he wanted to. She told him, "I understand the distinction." He told her, "Then I am acting on the wanting." She told him, "I know." The rain continued on the roof of the pergola, and the lightning moved further out to sea, and the rose garden smelled of wet earth and late summer, and the kiss was not the performance of a betrothed couple executing a conventional form. It was the specific, contained, entirely honest expression of two people who had arrived at the same place by a road that had cost them both considerably, and who had found, in the arriving, the thing that had been present between them since the Forsyth Ball in 1812, and had been waiting, with the patience of real things, to be allowed. He held her hands for a long moment after. He told her, 8 years is too long. She told him, 8 years is what we had. He told her, I intend to be more efficient about the next 8. She told him, I am holding you to that. James came to her in the first week of September. He came with the expression of a young man who has been carrying something that has become too heavy, and has decided that the setting down of it, whatever it costs, is necessary. He came to the library in the morning when he knew she would be there, and he sat in the chair across the table, and he told her everything. The debt was from a card game in his first season, the specific, foolish debt of a 20-year-old who had not yet understood that certain tables were constructed for the purpose of producing certain debts. Gerald Hartwell had purchased the debt from its original holder. Gerald had come to James in June with the debt and a request. Information about the wedding preparations, the timing of certain documents, the security arrangements at Seabrook that would allow Gerald access to the estate archive if required. James had not understood, initially, the full scope of what was being requested. He had provided small, apparently harmless pieces of information, the dates of the family's London visits, the schedule of Theodore's agent's absences from the estate. He had understood in July that the information was being assembled into something larger, and he had not known how to stop. Amelia listened. She listened with the full, specific attention she gave to everything that mattered, and she received the full account, and she did not perform the assessment of it for his benefit while he was giving it. When he finished, she told him, You are going to tell Theodore everything you have just told me. He told her, Theodore will never, she told him. Theodore is going to be angry. He is going to be genuinely, specifically angry, because you are his brother, and you are also 22 and you made a foolish choice, and then compounded it, and his anger is earned and real. She told him, he is also going to help you because that is who he is, and if you know your brother at all, you know that is true, she told him. The anger is necessary. The help is also necessary. You have to receive both. He looked at her with the expression of a young man encountering a form of clarity he had not expected from the woman who was going to be his sister. She told him, Go and find Theodore now, before the ball. The ball is in 6 days, and we need you on the right side of this. He went, she heard, from the library, the sound of the conversation beginning in the study below. Not the words, but the quality of the sound, which was the quality of something difficult being said and received. The quality changed over approximately 40 minutes, which she noted. By the end of the 40 minutes, the quality had become the quality of something being worked through rather than endured. She went back to the essay. The pre-wedding ball was held on a Friday evening at the Aldermere House in London, which was the largest and most socially significant house available for the occasion, and it was attended by 300 people who had various reasons for being there, and one reason in common, which was that it was the most significant social occasion of the autumn season, and absence was its own statement. Gerald Hartwell was present. Amelia had seen him at the door, had watched him work the room in the specific way of a man conducting reconnaissance, the warm, social, entirely managed warmth of a man who was gathering information while distributing charm. He had greeted her with the specific quality of an uncle who was fond of a niece, and who had her best interests in mind, and she had received this with the composed expression which was doing considerable work. Theodore's solicitor had received the documents that afternoon. The legal process was in motion in the specific, slow, irrevocable way of legal processes. She found Theodore at 9 o'clock near the east windows of the ballroom. He looked at her with the full attention. She told him it is time. He told her, the floor is yours. She walked to the center of the room. This was not a conventional thing to do. A woman walking to the center of a ballroom at a social occasion and requesting the room's attention was not a conventional thing, and Almack's and every room like it had spent 40 years enforcing the conventions that made it unconventional. She was aware of this. She had been aware of it since April when she first conceived of the possibility, and she had spent 6 months deciding whether the awareness was sufficient reason not to do it, and had arrived at the answer on a cliff path in June with the morning sea behind her and Theodore talking about the color of the water. The room noticed her. She told the room she had something to read. She told them it was addressed to them specifically and she was going to read it, under her own name, which was Lady Amelia Hartwell, and not under the name of Mr. A. Hartley, which had been the name she had used in the Westminster Chronicle for 3 years, and which she was retiring this evening. The room produced the specific charged quality of 300 people simultaneously revising their assumptions. She read the essay. It was 8 minutes long. It addressed in the clear and documented language that was Mr. Hartley's, her characteristic mode, 3 specific claims that had been circulating in the social world since April, which she named and attributed to their origin, and she provided the documentary refutation of each. The documentation included the letters from the estate archive, whose existence she described and whose contents she summarized. The documentation included the debt certificates and Gerald's correspondence with James, which James had provided to Theodore's solicitor that afternoon. She did not perform the reading. She read it the way she had written it, with the precision of a person who had something accurate to say and had found the clearest possible form for saying it. She read it entirely. When she finished, the room was the specific, full, ringing quality of a silence that was not absence but its opposite. The silence of 300 people receiving something and deciding simultaneously what to do with it. Gerald Hartwell was standing near the south wall. He was standing with the quality of a man whose position has been removed from under him in full view of the room he had been operating in for 12 years, and who is now required to manage the absence of the position with the composure appropriate to the room. His composure was insufficient. He left through the south door. The dawn came early to the Seabrook Cliff Garden. They had returned from London late. The legal proceedings had required the evening and the night, and Gerald was in custody by morning, and James was with his brother's solicitor, providing the full account. And the 300 people at the Aldermere House were dispersing into the London night with the specific, consuming interest of a social world that had been given an unusually rich evening's material. Amelia and Theodore walked the cliff path as the sky went from dark to the specific clear grey of an October dawn. She had not slept. She did not think he had either. They walked in the specific quality of 2 people who have been through something together, and who are now in the particular silence that follows significant events. Not the silence of exhaustion, but the silence of 2 people whose relationship to each other has been clarified by the preceding hours in a way that words had not yet arranged themselves to describe. The sea below the cliffs was the color of pewter. He stopped. She stopped beside him. He turned to face her, and his expression was the unmanaged version, the full, specific face of a man who had arrived at the end of a long road and found the thing at the end of it worth the length of the road. He told her, 8 years ago I let pride and lies keep me from you. I will not make that mistake again, he told her. Marry me, Amelia, not for your family's sake or mine, but because you are the only woman who has ever made me want more than duty. He told her, you make me want a life. She looked at him with the hazel eyes and the composed expression, which was not in this moment composed. It was entirely itself, the full face of a woman who had spent 8 years being useful and had, in the dawn above the Dorset Sea on an October morning in 1820, arrived at the moment she had been building toward without knowing she was building. She told him, I accept, not the arrangement, not the convenience, you. He held her hands. The sea was below them, and the October dawn was above them, and the cliff path was the cliff path they had walked every morning since June, and they stood on it in the specific quiet certainty of 2 people who have chosen each other in full knowledge of each other's full dimensions and have found the choosing after everything entirely sufficient. She told him, the library essay is going to require a revision now that I will be publishing under my own name. She told him, the argument in the 3rd section has been slightly compromised by the events of the preceding 8 hours, and will require a new framing. He told her, revise it on Wednesday. He told her, today I would like to simply be here. She told him, that seems reasonable. She put her head on his shoulder. The sea was below them, and the morning was the morning, and the October wind was the honest Dorset wind that had no interest in the opinions of London drawing rooms. The cliffs in April had a different quality than the cliffs in October. The October cliffs had been the cliffs of a decision, the specific, spare, stripped beauty of a landscape preparing for winter, and the light had been the low, clear, demanding light of a morning that wanted you to see things as they were. The April cliffs were the cliffs of something continuing. The gorse was yellow along the path. The sea had the specific bright movement of a season that was returning to its full capacity. The sky was the blue of a day that had decided to be generous. Amelia walked the path in the early morning as she had walked it since the previous summer, which was 6 months ago, which was the length of their marriage. She was 6 weeks into a new essay, the first essay published under her full name, Lady Amelia Blackwood, née Hartwell, in the Westminster Chronicle's March edition, which had produced a correspondence from the editor, Mr. Gibbons, in a register considerably more formal than his correspondence with Mr. Hartley, and which she found somewhat amusing. She heard Theodore on the path behind her. He came to walk beside her with the quality she had come to know as his characteristic morning quality. Fully present, unhurried, entirely himself. He had the parliamentary correspondence in his hand, which he brought to the cliff path when the morning was good, because he had found, since the previous summer, that the combination of the path and her company produced a quality of thinking that the study alone did not. She told him the March essay had produced 40 letters to the Chronicle. He told her 43. He told her he had seen the full post. She told him she was working on the April piece, which addressed the committee's revised position on the enclosure provisions, and which incorporated the data correction she had identified in September. He told her the committee's revised position needed more than a data correction. He told her he had been preparing remarks for the May session and had found in the preparation 2 further errors that compounded the one she had identified. She told him she wanted to see the remarks. He told her this evening in the library. She told him, "I will have the April draft by this evening." They walked. The April cliffs were generous with the light. The gorse was the yellow of something certain. The sea below was the particular bright movement of a world going forward. She told him, in the way that a woman tells a man something significant when they are walking, and the morning is good and the telling does not require ceremony of a stopped moment, because some things are more truthful in motion, that she was expecting a child. He stopped. She stopped beside him. He looked at her. She looked at him. The April morning was on his face, and the sea was behind him, and the expression on his face was the unmanaged version, the specific, full, present expression of a man receiving the most significant piece of information of a morning that had already been significant when, she told him, October. She told him, "I wanted to tell you on the cliff path because the cliff path is where we say the important things." He took her hand. She let him keep it. They stood on the April cliff with the sea below them, and the gorse yellow along the path, and the morning still offering what mornings in April offer to people who come out early enough to receive it, and he held her hand and they looked at the sea together. He told her, "The essay can wait." She told him the essay cannot wait. She told him the April deadline is the 12th. He told her Amelia. She told him Theodore. He told her, and the expression was the contained, genuine, entirely specific thing she had been cataloguing since the drawing room in April of 1820, and intended to catalogue for the rest of her life. He was the happiest he had been since the day she read the essay in the Aldermere ballroom, and removed any remaining uncertainty about who she was. She told him, the essay in the Aldermere ballroom was the 14th piece of work I had. Published, the happiness was mine regardless. He told her, I know. He told her the happiness was also his. She told him, yes. She told him, it is. She put her head on his shoulder, as she had put it there on the October morning, and the April sea whispered below the cliff, and the path went on ahead in the yellow gorse morning, and they went with it. And perhaps that is why this story will not let us go. Not because the documents were found, or the uncle was exposed, or the essay was read in the ballroom to 300 people who revised their understanding of who they had been looking at, but because of the quiet, because of the composed expression maintained for 8 years while she wrote essays under a false name and managed her father's household and buried the specific, private grief of a spring in 1812 when a young man had looked at her from across a room and then turned away and had not been able to find, in the turning, any version of it that made sense. She made the sense in the estate archive in July, in the summer of a year she had not expected to be significant, and she made it not with anger, but with the precise, clear-eyed attention that she gave to everything that required understanding. She had been told, by the inventory that the world conducted on every woman who walked into its rooms, that she was useful, that she was the daughter who managed things, that she was the essayist who required a false name, that she was the woman on the shelf who was now conveniently available for an arrangement. She was all of these things, and none of them were the whole. The whole was a woman who looked at every situation with the full, specific, unmanaged attention that was her gift and her inheritance, and who had spent 8 years applying that attention to everything except the thing she wanted, because the thing she wanted had been made inaccessible by a lie she did not know had been told. When the lie was named, she named it clearly. When the record needed correcting, she corrected it publicly. When the man on the cliff path asked her to choose him freely, she told him yes because she was free and he was the choice, and both of those things were true. That is the quiet rebellion, not the ballroom, not the essay. The 8 years of being entirely herself in every dimension available, maintaining the full extent of herself against the sustained pressure of a world that required less of her, and being ready, with the composed expression and the hazel eyes and the essay draft and the oilcloth pages of 2 years of documented work, when the October morning finally came. She was ready. She had been ready.